As soon as I saw you, oh, you got that too. Okay, as soon as I saw you, I thought, oh man, I am going to have to let my hair grow out so I could get that hairdo, because that is, that's what that, so much for that shaving my head thing, you know. Well, welcome everybody to Brainstorming the Human Connection, brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. My name is Lawrence Diggs, and we have a very interesting topic again. And we're going to be talking about the Rapid City Community Relations Commission with their coordinator, LaFawn Janis, in just a moment. But I would like to remind all of our panelists, and to those of you who are new, this is an interactive program. We try anyway to get you to ask questions, offer comments, opinions. So this is a safe place, at least so far. It's been a safe place to have a civil conversation, to get answers, to work on solutions, to get a better understanding of what actually is going on with our between us as human beings. What kind of things are people doing? Because a lot of times we hear about the problems and the struggles that people are having, and those are very important to understand. But we can lose sight of the fact that there are people who are working diligently to fix those things. And if we are not made aware of that, if we don't stay aware of that, we can actually work ourselves into a sort of depression, because we think, oh, the world's going to fall in a handbasket, when actually we're just not paying attention to the things that are improving, or at least people are working on. And, you know, it doesn't happen right away, but, you know, if we're working on problems, we have a chance as human beings. We have ways to communicate and share and improve the world as we know it or would want it. So, LaFawn, let's welcome to our program. Glad to have you.
Hi.
And go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I would like you to first introduce yourself, and by way of saying, well, where did you come from or grow up in, you know, and what kind of lifestyle, all of the stuff that's fit to say on TV, on the Zoom, that have you had that kind of prepared you or gave you the framework to do the work you're doing now? It's kind of starting with kind of what's your life background.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is LaFawn Janis. I am Oglala Lakota, born in Pine Ridge. The hospital that I was born in is no longer there. So I don't know if that ages me or not, but I was born to a teenage mother, and she was a foster child, so which means I was born a foster child as well. Some extended family took me about 16 months old, and then we moved to Rapid City in 1983. So I did stay with this foster family for a long time, but when we speak of, how history has affected us, it affected my family greatly, and a lot of my extended family as well. So even though we were not living on the reservation, we still had the effects of all the trauma that had happened due to history, right? And so moving to Rapid in the 80s, it was relatively tough. The community, it was just not cool to be Native American here. And I grew up in the south side of Rapid City, which, was very middle class. And I was one of maybe 5 Indigenous students in my school. So I would say starting from the age of 5 years old, I started experiencing, different sorts of prejudices and racist remarks and behaviors from the kids. And so I always call it being, living in both worlds, because, we did have our we did have our cultures, you know, we had our culture, and then we had Rapid City. And so I feel like, you know, learning how to navigate and manage to live in both cultures did prep me. So I like that question because I feel like it did prep me to where I'm at today. I always say I became an extrovert out of survival, because it was either, you know, you stand up and stand strong and proud, or you get eaten alive. And so because of those experiences that I've had to deal with living throughout the country and whatnot, I can talk to anybody and I can be in any situation and navigate it. And so I did go to school in the RC, Rapid City Area School System, and graduated from Black Hills State. And then I too became a teenage mother, and he was my force to make a change. That's when I realized that you know, life should be different, should have been different for myself. And then he was my my navigating force to you know, to stop some of the generational trauma and whatnot. And so when I graduated Black Hills State, I moved him out of Rapid City because I refused to allow my son to ever feel less. And I knew for him to have somewhat of a fair chance, it was not going to be here. And I know those are hard things to hear for some people, but it was the absolute truth. I just never wanted him to feel that he was less because of his skin color. And so we moved to North Carolina, where we were looked up to. You know, that's where he was the 0.01% Native American of the school. However, people were just enamored with us and our culture, and they were so excited to learn. And so it was really beautiful to watch my son be able to walk with confidence and just have that opportunity, right? And then we went to Colorado, and then slowly came back home because he was a teenager at the point that we came home. And it was right before Colorado legalized recreational marijuana. And so I thought, okay, because he was already, you know, dabbling. And I was like, let's just see if we can change the situation here. So we came back to Rapid City then. And I've been back to South Dakota for 10 years. And I was a small business owner. I had a maternity and baby store and gave that 4 years. And in the meantime, though, I've always been a nonprofit and business. And so I decided, like, okay, you know, I need to get back to what's true to my heart. And so I came back and I started consulting and worked with area reservations, worked within Rapid City, did a lot of the work, did some anti-violence prevention, some sexual violence prevention, and then a lot of business and leadership development with our tribes. And what was really cool about working like not just with the area tribes, but my tribe specifically, is that a lot of the people I was working with, it was, you know, so for instance, at the casino or in the school systems down there, it was their first time having a job. And so my goal was to reduce the turnover rates and keep, you know, try to keep people sustainable. And what I always felt was, well, what was empowering to me was to see their faces and just be like, you are our voice. And when people come to this casino, you're the first person that they get to see and experience of our tribe and our culture. And you just watch their pride heighten, because they don't think they thought about that. And I'm like, you're representing me, you're representing my children, you know, so what can we do to elevate you to you know, be where you want to be and accomplish what you want to accomplish. This might be a stepping stone, or you might be here for 20 years like some people have, you know. And then just with the children as well, with the anti-violence prevention work, just speaking with all of our youth. And so I've worked with a broad range of people. And then as far as Rapid City goes, again, we're like living in both worlds. Eventually those kids who picked on me became friends. And then same with college. I went to college with a lot of people who grew up here in Rapid City. So I forged a lot of relationships within this community. And so then I was recruited to be the Community Relations Commission. And initially we were the Human Relations Commission. I guess, Lawrence, do you want me to dive into the history of that next? Or
Yeah, that was actually my next question is, can you give us some kind of background on how this Rapid City Community Relation Commission has developed into what it is today?
Sure.
And also cover like what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. So the Community Relations Commission just changed its name 2 months ago. And we were the Human Relations Commission, which was actually formed in the 1950s. And it's a mayoral appointed commission. And it was more of a political commission back then because Native Americans were camping down by the creek. I don't know if everyone knows Rapid real well or where everyone's from, but there's this park called Founders Park, and that was actually called Camp Oshkosh. And not only did we have the boom of the gold rush, we had tourism coming through, right? Like Mount Rushmore was being built, and or not being built, but it was here and whatnot. And so they considered the Native American community a problem, and they wanted us out of sight. And so around the same time, there was relocation efforts in the 40s because Pine Ridge has an area down there that was they made into a bombing range during the war. And so they gave the residents of that specific area 30 days to move. And so they gave them 1,200 acres on the west end of Rapid City that wasn't considered city limits yet. And so they made a boarding school there. And this is interesting how this history was almost written out of Rapid City history until our grandmothers said, because we have a new hospital that has been built since these efforts, since the research has begun around the boarding school. And they said, where are the kids? Please go find the kids. And we're like, what kids? And they're like, Rapid City was a boarding school. Our kids were sent here and all the land was taken. And so that's when we found out all the facts of the 1,200 acres. And so it's called the Act of 1948, in which the National Guard, the city of Rapid City, and the Rapid City area schools were allotted most of the land. And then the second tier was churches, and that could buy for, a small or reasonable fee. But those reasonable fees were, $1 for 20 acres, right? Like it was insane. So these churches created their entities based out of the need. And then the third tier was for needy Indians, and needy Indians is actually written into law. So we made t-shirts that said needy Indian on it.
I want one of those.
Yeah. And
I want to be an imposter.
Yeah. And so when we found this out, we found out who had the deeds, and there's homes now in some of that on the land, because what the churches did was they bought it. And so they did own the deed, right? And so what they did is they split that up and then let people buy it to build homes. And some of this is the most pristine land in Rapid City. And we only have the Susan campus, and that's it. And so because the boarding school was there, families were camping near the creek because they wanted to be near their children. And then they moved over to Camp Oshkosh, which is like 1.5 miles away from the boarding school. And then that's when, the Indian camp lived for a couple decades. And then the boarding school turned into a tuberculosis clinic, and it was the Indian tuberculosis clinic. And then the white tuberculosis clinic was over in Custer. And then from a TB clinic, it transitioned into Indian Health Services, which is our health services here in Rapid City. And so with all that land gone, and then Camp Oshkosh with the Human Relations Commission formed, the mayor appointed his buddies, and there was a sale of a specific parcel of land to West Middle School, to RCAS. And then with that money, they bought Sioux Addition, which is over by Lowe's, and gave parcels of land to families. So when you look at these like the map, the lot map, you'll see old family names around here. So like the Montgomerys and the Red Elks, and there's even Janice's and whatnot. So
Can you hold on a second? Can you tell me what RCAS is?
Rapid City Area Schools.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And so that's how they this Human Relations Commission, that's how Rapid City actually ended up segregated. Because when you look at, let's, for instance, Sioux Falls or Mitchell, there was no actual efforts of segregation. So if you look at the racial dot map of our population, you know, we look very different versus the other cities in South Dakota. And so that's how they were able to move their, what they called the Indian problem, to North Rapid and out of sight, out of mind. And look, Sioux Addition actually went 15 years without water or electricity. And they had to walk 3.5 miles to get water from Rapid Creek. And it was actually the teachers from the Rapid City High School, which is in the center of town, who lobbied for water to be channeled out to Sioux Addition because the students were coming in filthy. And so, and then you see old pictures, and it, you know, what they said that, you know, we could have or build homes, but the homes that they spoke of were literally just shacks. And you'll see electricity like piped by, but nothing off to this community. And then eventually those families lost those homes because it was county at the time, and nobody told them that they had to pay taxes. When actually they told them they didn't have to pay taxes. But then they ended up, you know, whatever happened there. And so all the families in Sioux Addition ended up losing their homes because of the tax situation. And so that's still actually a fight that we're going to take on at some point for those families. And so the Human Relations Commission has a not very kind past, and then it ran for a while, and then with our new mayor, he initially wanted to put it to rest because it was supposed to be a complaint commission. So any sort of complaint in Rapid City can be filed with this commission in modern times. And he said, well, is anything really happening? Are people really coming to this commission? Do we really need this commission? And so that's when he assigned a task force to look into it and see if there was a need. And when this task force researched the Human Relations Commission, that's when all of this history came about of its original purpose. And so because that history is so dark, he said, well, why don't you guys bring me a proposal, or do we just get rid of it because it's so dark, right? And so this task force came up with the proposal that let's rewrite this, let's rework it for community healing. And so again, we were just, you know, recently the Human Relations Commission, now we're the Community Relations Commission, in which we offer educational forums. And these are really hot topic forums. You know, it's what the Indian economics, the impact on Rapid City, on the city of Rapid City. That was one of them. And, you know, we had a panel of business leaders and people who work on our, who work on growing Rapid City and whatnot. And so I feel like it was really eye-opening for the community because they don't realize the millions of dollars that the area reservations bring to Rapid City. to host conferences, to rent hotel rooms, to dine, to shop. You know, the food prices are so high on the reservations that they come to Rapid City to just buy their food. And even the Northside Walmart is actually the highest profiting Walmart in the nation,
Wow.
because that's how many people come here to shop. We are a hub. And so that was one of the forums. Another forum was hosted by the Youth City Council, which is really exciting. Rapid City has a Youth City Council. And so we feel that their voices are so important that they moderated an education forum when we had school board elections this last round. And so I think it's important, you know, that a lot of the community showed up for that one. And it just showed our students that, you know, people do want to hear them. Because I feel, you know, often their voices are so overlooked. Everyone tells them how to live and how to think and what they should be educated, but then they're not listening to, you know, their actual
what they need. Well, I want to open it up to our esteemed panel here that have, you know, been listening, and I'm just wondering if anyone has questions, comments, experiences, etc.
I do have a
Yes.
question.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Because the history is, I mean, I'm from South Dakota, but I'm from North Central, so I don't know about the Black Hills. Didn't know. What I knew was that the Black Hills belonged to the tribe, the Native Americans there, until gold was discovered, and then the whites took over. So originally was what is today what is today Rapid City, was that part of Pine Ridge Reservation?
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then I didn't really understand the place west of Rapid City that was kind of shuffled off to the Native Americans. That was originally their land, right? I mean, it was really the Dakota land, right? So
Right.
they're being given back the worst part of the land that has the least value to whites, but they're not getting any of the conveniences, if you can call getting water a convenience. So I wasn't really sure about all of that history. It's, even though I was alive in 1948, I didn't know that part
Right.
going on. I knew about the Standing Rock.
Sure.
So can you just clarify that a little bit for me?
Sure. So the Fort Laramie Treaty in the 1800s, I believe it's 1872, 1876, the Fort Laramie Treaty, the land is really expansive. It goes from eastern Wyoming, a little bit of Montana, part of North Dakota, a lot of, I mean, it's just, if you ever look up the map of the treaty or Fort Laramie Treaty, it's huge piece of land. And that was they created that treaty because they wanted to have Western expansion and no more wars, right? So when people say, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I had this he's 48 years old. So to me, definitely old enough to know better. And he said, "We beat your asses." And I said, actually, the government treated with us because they wanted the wars to stop. And this treaty was, the treaties that they created in the 1800s are basically along the same lines of the Treaty of Paris, because in Paris, France, they wanted to stop the wars there too. And so therefore, you know, the American government, you know, went off those similar thought process. And so when then gold was discovered after that treaty was signed. So what the government did was they used two of our strengths against us, which is family and compassion, right? Because we wanted to be able to live and thrive and care for our communities. And and so they shook our hand and then went back on that treaty because of the gold. And so not only is Rapid City in that, all of the Black Hills it's a really vast area. So when you hear people say this land is not for sale, that is why. It's we're stewards of the lands, we're not owners of the land. And one thing about this position is that that's what I do, is go in and educate. So I was just spent a day with sophomores at Stevens High School, and they had no idea that their school sits on that 1,200 acres, right? And they actually had no idea that the Susan campus is right across the street where children their age were taken from their families and forced to reside there. And they had no idea that, so far we found 50 children who have passed away while they were attending that. And many were from the Spanish flu, but others ran away. There's stories like that across the nation, whether it's in Canada or the United States. And then what was your other question?
I can't remember myself, but it was, can you help us out? Anybody? Maybe.
Well,
Lawrence, go ahead.
you're asking like what I guess the outcome of that, or was that clarification of where the land stand?
I think I'm asking in one question what somebody has written in an entire book and about this Laramie Treaty and the western part of South Dakota. And as your guest pointed out, Canada and Wyoming. And I think I'm just going to have to look for a book on it. I mean, you have made it clear, okay, but you've also told me something I didn't know anything about. So I'm not going to get total understanding from just one 5-minute answer.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it does bring up another question.
I had another question.
Oh, go ahead, Sharon.
Right.
Or
Well, this is,
who? Oh, March.
yeah. The Indians were North Rapid, and they had been told.
I think somebody has. Excuse me, March. Someone has a phone or something that's ringing.
I have a chime clock every hour. It plays
okay.
and I can't shut it off.
Okay, cool.
It's a Christmas chime clock, so every hour it plays a Christmas carol. I have Christmas 12 months of the year.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, and they had been told they didn't have to pay taxes. Well, then the government decided they needed to pay taxes, and they couldn't do that. They lost their homes. Where did they go then?
So if you look at the racial dot map, North Rapid, it's slowly starting to, broaden out into North Rapid south. And so it's just, there was a community that was built right next to Sioux Addition called Lakota Homes. And that was created through like a HUD housing situation. So that's where a lot of families ended up residing, right next to Sioux Addition in Lakota Homes, because it was affordable housing. However, what they did do in that affordable housing is, back then, I don't know if everyone's traveled or been to any projects in the cities and whatnot where they paint them. Here they painted them Easter egg colors. So you knew that it was, like what they wanted us to be, project based. And there's 2 entrances to Lakota Homes. And again, my experience just starts in 1980 when I was born. But, in the 80s here in Rapid City, they would gate one of the entrances so that the families in that community had only one entrance and one exit, so the police could monitor them it felt very animalistic. And so now it's still affordable housing, but anybody can have access to it. So slowly families are, coming into Rapid City more. And then more non-native families are living in Lakota homes. And so that's interesting for us because it's decades, decades upon decades, it's been predominantly Native American. So everything's changing and growing. And then, but another thing about what I do with the commission is it's about building bridges and really trying to heal these relationships. So again, the education piece, the having what we say is courageous conversations. And I had to learn to do this because it was something I've been, vocal about various topics in Rapid City. And my direct boss is the city attorney. And he said, just so you know, when you take this position, you're going to have to start, you can have your opinions and thoughts, but they can't be so public because this office needs to remain unbiased. Because when we want to bring everybody to the table, they have to be able to feel comfortable to come to the table with you. And I was like, I'm very capable of that because of how I've had to navigate living in Rapid City and living in the world, right? And but yeah, he's like, just remember, everybody's watching.
Yeah. Well, that actually brings up, were you going to say something else? I didn't want to cut you off. That brings up a question that I think is kind of central to this conversation. And that is, if you have a target for resolution, in other words, if you're going to have conflict resolution, well, it seems like you need to have a target for resolution. And I often have a hard time imagining what the resolution is. That's not to say I don't think a resolution is possible. It's just hard to think of what's the shape, because it doesn't seem to be just the technical things you write down. The treatise and the abrogation of those treaties show us clearly that whatever you write down is nothing if it isn't backed by sentiment and understanding and sort of like adherence to those positive sentiments. So it often occurs to me that if one group of people have their self-esteem tied to being superior and in charge, how do you negotiate that? How do you have a conversation with people who basically don't believe that you deserve to exist? And they don't go too far from saying that outright. I mean, it's not even coded anymore. How do you have that conversation?
So you hope that educating people and there's people who believe we shouldn't have to do the educating. People should educate themselves, but they won't, and they don't. And
can they? I mean, even if they wanted to, could they?
Yes.
That's one of those pull yourself up by the bootstrap things.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and that's what we say about having courageous conversation, right? Is that they have to come to the table and they have to be willing to listen and understand and be uncomfortable, because none of us grow when we're just in comfort. And a lot of Rapid City stays in their bubble. A lot don't move away and come back. Those who do move away, I have friends who will never bring their children back here to raise them, right? But so for instance, the guy who said, we beat your ass, you're never going to have reparations because it'll be civil war. And you all haven't done shit. Basically, like, we haven't done anything to have any sort of reparations, or that we deserve reparations, right? And so I looked at him and I said, we're at dinner because we were with a group of friends, and nobody heard him say this to me because, he's being a bully, but he's not going to be a bully in front of everybody.
No.
Yeah.
Bullies are cowards on the other side.
So I looked at him and I said, we're going to have this conversation later. I said, but here's the thing. I was like, genocide is not something that you make fun of. And the second I said that is where I could navigate with just, this is just an example, is where I could navigate any sort of future conversation with him. And so he said, he just didn't know what to say, right? Because you use the word genocide. And I said, that is not something you make about. And I said, you don't understand the level of loss that that we feel, and so he's like, and so he just basically went away, and then later on I asked him, I said, I don't know that any of my elders are going to be willing to come to the table with you, but if they were, would you be willing to sit? Because this gentleman, or he's actually not a gentleman, but he thrives off of his grandparents getting free land, and he's inheriting this land, and he's walking with this arrogance and being a bully about it. And he doesn't want the system to change, right? But I'm going to bring it to his attention again and just say, hey, are you, will you be willing to learn this? Now, that's an unresolved situation. And that was actually directed at me, right? And my people. Now there's another situation where two Native American mentors were washing their vans at a car wash, and the manager of that car wash treated them very inappropriately. And so immediately we're getting phone calls, and they're like, what do we do? And the mom was like, well, I'll buy a membership. And I told her, I said, you do not buy a membership. You do not give them any business right now. Let's just hold on. So we actually found out who the owner of the car wash was. And the owner came to the table, and he brought the manager. And they sat with these two young, beautiful Native American mentors and had that courageous conversation. And by the end of it, everybody left with more education, more understanding, apologies were made. And the owner now is a major donor to the Native American lacrosse team here. So those are the outcomes that we're hoping for. And those are the things of, advocating for people and then modeling the respectful behavior ourselves. So I could have got, hasty. I could have had, my cousins come beat this guy up for what he was saying. But I've been having to practice modeling and being like, okay, I need people like you comfortable to come to the table. And is it hard? Absolutely. But that is what this commission wants to do. And the commission is 9 members. They're all appointed by the we're making fry bread this evening, so my fry bread maker keeps calling.
See, I would be out of here and go and get the fry bread.
We're actually at the School of Mines here in Rapid City for a cultural expo, and so our Native American group here, we're helping them cook tonight. So Saturday, if you guys are in the area, it's here on the School of Mines campus, and there's going to be food and presentations from like Bangladesh, Nepal, of course, the American Indian community here, whatnot. So tonight we're cooking. Yeah.
Okay, so I still like to go back to the kind of the fundamentals and the functions of like how do you move forward based on your goals. But before we get into that, I want to open it up to our esteemed panel again and see if they have any questions or comments or ideas that they would pertinent to this conversation that they would like to share. Hearing none, for the good of the order, we'll proceed. Okay, so I'm looking at goals, and you mentioned something just a minute ago about, like piece by piece, person by person. Is there any way to, let's say, accelerate the ripple effect? I mean, you could go mathematical or logarithmic, on these things, or, there's lots of, ratios that they could expand. But how do you see expanding the number of people who have those meaningful, courageous conversations? Because, onesie twosies, I see the turnover of the human population would defeat that strategy. So it has to be, seems to need to expand. Can you talk a little bit about what that expansion would look like, or is that something that's on your radar, or is that somebody else's responsibility? How does that work?
No, I feel like it's everybody's responsibility, because we are supposed to be all relatives. And what's interesting is that the people who are having the harder times having the conversations are predominantly older populations, right? Older generations. However, they're also there's a lot who are willing to come to the table and have the conversations. And so the way I see it is, one, the educational forums, making people comfortable to come to them. And then also really getting into our schools, because rewriting what's happening right now, and with the attempt of rewriting our social studies standards, nobody's talking to the children. When I spent that day it was 7 classes back to back, talking about the history of Rapid City, a lot of what I told you. And these students are just hungry for that knowledge. They are hungry to know this history, because they're relating to it, because they are the same age as children who were stolen from their families. Many of them have younger siblings. And so when they can conceptualize what happened and how Rapid City was created, or segregated, they're just like, wow. And if we can start at those ages, and I saw some kids who were uncomfortable. However, they're still hearing it, right? And we don't grow until we have some sort of uncomfort or discomfort. And so I think that's where, we can really begin. So with the older generations, we do the educational forums. We ask people to come to the table and be part of that process. But it really is getting in with the youth and the students and letting them know, the history of their own areas.
So how are you doing that right now? What are the ways that you are getting the students connected, or making this information available to them?
So, for instance, today at this cultural expo is one way. The history teachers have to invite us in. And so that's actually a movement that's happening right now too, is, the history teachers have to allow us to come in. And this was during a Native American unit. And she posed the question, what is the city of Rapid City doing to heal these relationships? And I thought, beautiful question, but here's where we have to start, right? And so it started with history and then moved into modern times. And then there's also, there's curriculum being created. There's the Oceti Shakoi standards that have been written. I mean, they are written. They are adopted by the state of South Dakota. And right now we're putting pressure on the Rapid City area school system to implement them. Why is this not being taught? The Oceti Shakoi is the 7 councils. And, it's Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota for the language. However, the Teton Nation is the largest that probably most of you know about. But the Teton Nation, obviously all the way to the Tetons in Wyoming, but it consists of all of our reservation, all of our tribes is in the Teton Nation. The Teton Nation is only one of the councils in the 7 councils. So think of how expansive this area is with the Oceti Shakoi, and that those standards are written for our youth to be able to learn.
So I guess I'm looking for more, like almost what can we do kind of thing. It's like, Of course, it starts with having these kind of conversations as we're having right now. And as much as I would like the human brain to have photographic memory, it actually doesn't. And even if people study some things, often, you go into 4 or 5 years after that, and most of that knowledge is gone. But what I see as a possibility is like, well, how do you feel? Because it really doesn't matter what you know if you don't feel any different. But if you feel different, you'll more likely retain more of the knowledge, if that makes any sense. If people have a connection with Native people, that's a personal connection, things that they're, it has nothing to do with any program or, any law or anything like that. You just have some connections to people so that, the kind of things you're talking about maybe come up over the dinner table. And I draw a parallel to, let's say, for example, if you look at things in Black history, most people who that history is about, their offsprings can't talk intelligently about that, So, I mean, they may know bits and pieces and sort of high points, but they're not positioned to have a conversation. So when they want to explain to their friend about something, they actually have to go back and study it. I had that example, a personal example, when I was in Japan, and a guy asked me to do a Black History Month program for the National Broadcasting Company, right? And I said, well, I would, but I don't know that much. I mean, it was years ago, but because it occurred to me that, okay, yeah, I know some, okay, I know who Martin Luther King is and, Emancipation and Proclamation, but all those kind of details, there's a lot of history there. And all that history makes up how people feel. So I'm just wondering, when I think about things like that, LaFawn, I'm just wondering, I don't want to sound like it's defeatist, because I think we can find a way, but I'm just wondering how you guys are thinking about that.
I think the parallels, I mean, there is definitely a parallel between both of our histories. But it's also what's been taught, right? I mean, Black history, Native American history, the Japanese history. A lot of people don't even know the internment camps also included the Japanese population. Business owners were being ripped out of their business, never to regain it again. And so you're hitting it on the head. It's just having the conversations, and it's that education piece. But you do have to have it. And when you do realize, and if you do have these conversations around your kitchen table with the youth, say, hey, let's look it up, because our phones are in our hands. Our phones are in their hands. Instead of an encyclopedia sitting, in the living room anymore, it's just, and so you have it right, but we can move the needle. It's going to be hard to move the needle quickly, but we can, and it's just doing the work.
Right. Well, it also brings to mind that what we seem to lack is opportunities for people to just have their autonomic nervous system calm down, and they feel, let's say, there's no stress level, there's no fight or flight things going off in their head. They can feel comfortable. And let's say, as one of my mentors would say, they feel unthreatened, and it's not to mean that the threat, the brain doesn't interpret reasonable threat with unreasonable threat. It just feels threat, and it usually doesn't know why. So I'm just thinking, how do we get to the point where we can have a conversation, but not feel threatened? I'll pick up on that, but Sharon had something that she wanted to say. Or did you want to answer that first, or?
And actually, what I missed telling everyone about was that's what we focus on a lot. We're doing a media campaign on civil discourse, and really defining what civil discourse looks like, because, starting when we had our first Black president, I feel like civil discourse slowly started going out the window. And then it just has gotten worse, And so that is a lot of what we're doing now, is just defining that and reminding people you can have the conversations. You don't have to fight. There doesn't need to be any punching, you know.
Mhm.
Love that you
Yeah.
right, because that's exactly what my office is supposed to be, is unbiased. I cannot show any emotion. You know, and again, it's hearing that racist comment and just having to navigate it. But a lot of, again, you know, trials and tribulations in my own life have helped me get to this point.
Yeah. I don't want to miss out on Sharon. Sharon, you want to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to make it fast, because what LaFawn is saying is more important, that's for sure. And I think that the grassroots approach is very good around the table in the town, but you're also bucking state legislatures all over the United States who don't want students to feel threatened or uncomfortable. And they're trying to get rid of a lot of things in American history. And I think the only way to change it is on a grass level, but then everybody has to vote. And the voting for some people, mail-in votes are being discontinued by law by state legislatures, so people can't get to the polls as easily. I mean, we've got a real ball of fish here, if that's a metaphor. I mean, a real nasty knots. KNOTS.
Right.
Mhm.
And so that's part of, you know, I know it may feel defeating sometimes to write your legislators, but they are supposed to listen to us, right? That is why they are voted in. And so we do speak about that often, is you have to talk to your local councils, your local government, and then your state government as well, because there's just, I mean, to take away and look at that system. I know that, you know, there's words that trigger people, but really these systems have to be dismantled if you want my children to live peacefully amongst your children. And I, you know, and the word colonization, and there's a group here called Indian Collective, and their tag is defend, decolonize, develop, right? And so when people hear the word decolonization, they're like, oh my God. And I'm just like, no, look up the definition, look what the systems have done to oppress other people, you know, to oppress people. And that is a beginning of even decolonizing your own frame of mind. You don't have to be a person of color to start to decolonize your own thought processes of what you've grown up with. And you're already,
But
go ahead.
no, I was going to say that brings sort of the two, let's say, opposing views into focus. And that is, you know, I think it would be disingenuous to pretend like there are not people who would just assume that you went away, because for them, that's the simplest problem. So they have to see a value in having a conversation with you.
Right.
And if the value is just simply a threat, and they feel like, well, okay, yes, we could have this fight, but I would win, then they're not necessarily motivated. For them, that's an opportunity to finish the problem, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm not seeing how people, you know, how I'm still working on it myself. It's like, well, how do you get those people to get to the point where you can actually have an actual conversation with them, so that you're both on the same side of the table having a conversation, as opposed to being opposite side and arguing, when the other one side is not hearing the other and the other one's not. Especially if, let's say, in the colonization, some people feel like, well, that colonization thing kind of worked out good for me, because now I have this land that used to, you know, with some other people here, but now we whipped your ass, and so now we got it.
Mhm.
Well, you know what I mean? If they see that as a win for them, if they're still seeing that as a win for them, how do you navigate getting somebody to say, actually, it wasn't a win for you, which I believe that's the case. but they
Mhm.
can't see it yet. you
Well,
know.
he has to, for instance, that situation that I was in, for one, he humanizes me as his friend. So he tries to put himself here with me, right? But then has to let me know he's still here. However, because he still wants to pretend, or, like you say, like he's happy where he's at. But how I can make that change, hopefully, is that he humanizes me by calling me his friend. And so I just need that 2 minutes with him to say, actually, you didn't beat our ass. It's called a treaty. But history. So that still is an opportunity. But it's down to the human level. And so unfortunately, South Dakota is predominantly Caucasian, and so many mixed nationalities of German and Swedish and whatnot, because I tell people, I'm like, it can be based upon race, but also what about culture? Let's celebrate the Swedish community. Let's celebrate the Czech community. Let's celebrate the German community. Because you're all the same color, we could still celebrate your individuality. And so they have to get in their brain that thought process of humanizing each other. And
And you make a real good point, because it wasn't that long ago before all of those groups, they were fighting each other just like they're fighting Native.
Mhm.
Even if you go to like Scandinavians, they were all
Right.
fighting. Germany, for example, is a younger country than America, and like all those different places in Germany, they were all
Right.
fighting each other in the same way. So
Right.
I think that one of the things we miss is that we think it's this quote racial problem, but no, it's human.
Mhm.
The way that people treat each other is a human thing. That's why I think it's to their advantage to recognize that. And that's, that might be a big chunk to chew, but I think if people could come to recognize that, hey, look, what this person does to these people over here, if they disappear, they're going to start doing it to you. They're going to
Mhm.
find somebody to be on that part. So it's in your interest to
Right.
let us come together and figure this out.
Right.
Betty?
Yes, this is wonderful. Maybe LaFawn's group has already done this, but I thought of something that might help to engage people who are afraid to engage. I think most white people have questions once they become aware that the natives were here first and what was done to them. I grew up right here, and I always thought it was ancient history. So maybe if you had an advertised panel or a presentation and put it out like, come find out everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. White people often want to know something about how Indians live and do and be, but they don't want to ask because they're afraid they'll be offending them. Simple things. I mean, like, it's not been rare that people come out here for press reasons and ask the natives they meet, well, do you really still live in teepees? That's been going on and still goes on. But just those of us who live here, rather than go to a powwow or go to some kind of special event on the reservation, they're afraid to. And so maybe just a panel of some of the commission people, both white and non-white, up there who are willing to say, this is who we are. No, we don't live in teepees, and maybe show a picture, or, I can't even think of the questions right now at this end of the program, but I think there's a lot of lively conversation to be had, and maybe you can't always do it one-to-one because people don't know, they're afraid of making things worse. And that's in addition to those who don't want things to be better. And I know there are a lot of those too. So
Right.
thank you.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Betty. Unfortunately, we have actually run out of time, and we have an effort here to have a hard stop at 11:30, and now it's 11:31. LaFawn Janis, I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope that at some time we will have another occasion to carry on this conversation. I wish you well with your work. It's very important work. Thank
Thank
you,
you so-
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having.
Yeah. And see you next week, same time, same station.